Welcome to the Art and Soul Podcast. I'm Alicia, your fellow dreamer and guide on this path of healing. This podcast is our sanctuary, a place where artists, creatives, and sensitive souls like you and me can come to recharge and find inspiration. You'll find tips and tools to help you on your awakening journey. Let's dive deep and discover the magic inside of us. Hello. Thank you for joining me for another week. We are talking all about the different energy centers in the body. You have 7 major energy centers. And so week by week, we have been going through so that you can see if your energy centers are balanced or if you have some imbalances going on. We have talked about the root chakra, we've talked about the sacral energy center, and now we are on to the solar plexus. So if you haven't listened to the first 2, I would recommend going back and listening to the last 2 podcast episodes, just because it'll give you some idea of your entire energy body. We want to make sure we are fully aligned. Even if you know or you feel like you are imbalanced in some way in this middle part of your body, in your midsection, sometimes there can be an even greater root cause of that goes even deeper. So you want to make sure that you are looking into every single energy center when we're talking about imbalance, just to make sure that some of the ones that are more foundational are balanced before you move up the ladder. The solar plexus is still part of that foundational energy in the body. After we get to the heart and we cross over above the heart, that is kind of the more etheric part of us. But the solar plexus still has a lot of physical, animalistic qualities to it. So we're going to talk about all of that today. And we're going to discuss whether yours is balanced or not. So the solar plexus energy center sits right above your belly button in the upper abdomen. And overall, it is associated with self-esteem, it is associated with willpower, and with being able to take action on your dreams and goals. This really is your center sun. It is your inner radiance as a human being, and this is where all of your power comes from. If you are a recovering people pleaser like me, you might have some issues in your solar plexus, or for you, it just might be one of your undefined centers. It might be a place where you are not very stable and not very strong energetically. So basically, that just means you need to pay more attention to it than another person who has a defined center would. The solar plexus is the center of your ego, it's the center of your personal identity and your autonomy. It really governs your confidence, your internal confidence, and how that displays externally. It also governs your ability to make decisions, your self-discipline, and your ability to follow through and take action on things. A lot of people who have difficulties in this energy center might be the type of people who start a project and don't follow through to the end. Maybe you find yourself, especially if you're a creative, coming up with all sorts of inspiring ideas, and maybe you have a journal and a list of all the things that you want to do, that you want to make, that you want to put out into the world, but you never actually get to the point where you are following through on that, where you are releasing all of that into existence. And so if that is you, then chances are there is something going on in this part of the body. The solar plexus chakra is connected to the element of fire. It's connected to the color yellow. So it really is that internal sun, that internal vitality. And let's be honest, a lot of times when we aren't following through with the things we want to do in our life, we're not achieving our goals and getting to the finish line on the things that we dream about doing, a lot of the times it's because we feel tired, we feel stagnant, we feel like we don't have the energy to do it. So if you really think of this space as like your internal battery, then you can understand how to work with that energy on a physical level, charge it up, and work toward the things you dream about doing. This is also the place, there are so many important organs in this part of the body. You've got your intestines, your colon, you have your pancreas, your spleen, your liver, your stomach, your gallbladder. So many important parts of the body and parts of the digestive system are here. The liver really is one of these organs that is so overlooked when we talk about health and kind of regulation. The heart and the brain get a lot of attention, but the liver and the gut don't get as much attention as some of the other seemingly more important organs. But really, the liver and the gut have so much to do with how we show up in the world. So we're going to get into that a little bit deeper as well as we go. But when you think about digestion, this space in the body is not just working towards physical digestion and absorption. It is also where we process things emotionally. It is that space between the heart where you're feeling the emotions and the root where you're releasing the emotions. And somewhere in there, there's a processing, there's an absorption and a release that has to happen for you on an energetic level for your emotional state. So a lot of times when we're looking at this space, there is a lot of emotional energy in here. And typically, it's the emotional energy that people want to hold on to, they want to constrict, they want to pretend like it's not there. So in the colon, a lot of times you'll find grief and stubbornness. In the liver, you'll find anger and resentment, things like that we want to pretend don't even exist and we don't feel them. So let's just talk a little bit deeper about some of those mental and emotional elements of the solar plexus. So let's start here with the ego. In many spiritual communities, there is this sense that we want to get rid of the ego or escape the ego. And sorry to break it to you, but that is not happening. In this reality that we live in, part of it is having a personal identity. And that identity helps us to interact with the world, to interact with society, and to fulfill our purpose and take action on things. When we try to pretend like we are so ascended that we don't have an ego, a lot of times we are very removed from society. We're extremely removed from the very reasons that we came to Earth in the first place. Most of us who are spiritual and creative beings came to this earth to make a difference in some way. If it's on a small scale or a large scale, it doesn't matter, but many of us are here having this spiritual experience in a physical body because we want to learn, we want to grow, and we want to change the world for the better. We want to help humanity grow. We want to help humanity ascend and develop into a higher state of consciousness. And we cannot do that by being fully disconnected with that very humanness. And so part of having an ego is all about being able to connect with what it means to be human. The other thing is that your ego protects you and keeps you safe. It's not as bad as people make it out to be. The truly conscious individual, the truly spiritual and ascended individual is able to recognize when their ego is speaking and when it's protecting them and when it is not serving them. It's never going to disappear or completely go away. So when we're in this area of the body, when we're talking about the ego, it's really important to just remember all of that, and that to actually move forward, to take action, to take physical action in the world and achieve your dreams, you've got to employ the ego. So this ego right here helps us to develop our personal ambition and our drive, and it helps us to actually make decisions. Now, if you're making a decision from an intuitive place, then you've got the ego here, the gut reaction, you've got the heart space activated, and you've got the mind activated for problem-solving purposes. All of those working together are going to help you make a decision and take action. When it's blocked, when your solar plexus area is constricted for some reason, then you might feel self-doubt about moving forward. You might feel that fear of failure. You might allow the mind to take over and convince you that taking action is a bad idea. And I think that this is the problem with a lot of people who do have an underactive solar plexus. It's not that they cannot follow through. It's not that they cannot finish what they started. It's really simply that the mind is more active than the will. And so the mind will tell you all the reasons why you shouldn't do something, and it will come up with every scenario and every obstacle that is in your way to achieving that goal, which then leads to just feeling lethargic and procrastination and those types of things. So when your solar plexus is truly aligned and active, you do have that confidence and also the self-discipline to start moving forward, to start taking action, and to just show up in the world as your fullest, brightest, most energized self. There is also a sense of some people who have a fear of stepping into their power, whether that's a conscious thing or a subconscious thing. I've even talked to a lot of people in the spiritual community that are afraid to be in power because they don't want to use it for bad. And if all of us who are actually well-intentioned, good-hearted people decide to just remain powerless, guess who is going to continue to rule the world and to be in power? The people who aren't afraid of power and the people who are probably using it for manipulation and for nefarious purposes. So as human beings that are fully aligned and embodied and in love with life, with ourselves and with other people, we are the people that need to be in power. We are the people that need to come into the world with power, because what it does is it empowers other people to change and to heal and to grow and to really be moved into the fullness of life. A lot of people don't realize that that's an option. And so we are the ones that have to go out there after we've healed ourselves and after we've gone internally and worked through all of our shit. We are the ones that have to go out there and show other people that it's possible. And that the world isn't just a horrible place, and that all of these things that are happening that break our hearts are because people are misusing power, but there can be good use of power. I hear it all the time. I hear it when it comes to things like positions of power, but also abundance, financial abundance and security. When you have abundance in your life, you are able to bless more people. You are able to give more. You are able to put yourself out into the world fully and give your gifts to the world. If you're in survival mode, you are not able to do those things. So even just assessing your relationship with the idea of power here is going to be really, really important as you're working through this solar plexus chakra. Now let's get back to the liver for a minute here. So the liver is such an important organ. It has so many physical qualities like metabolizing our carbohydrates, our proteins, our fats. It stores nutrients. It detoxifies our system. It detoxifies our system of toxins and drugs and waste and breaks them all down so that the body can eliminate them. It regulates our hormones. It is in charge of immune cells. So our liver is extremely important. From an emotional and mental standpoint and a metaphysical standpoint, the liver really is the place that metabolizes our emotions. And the emotion that is most associated with the liver is anger. The liver is in charge of the flow of energy through the body. So our energy, our life force, our chi, whatever you want to call it, it moves through our system just the same way that our blood moves through our system and all of that. And just like the liver metabolizes physical components, it also metabolizes energy. And when it becomes stagnant, when this space becomes stagnant, this can lead to frustration, it can lead to irritability, and it can lead to anger. It is a little bit of one of those situations, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Were you angry first and you weren't willing to process that anger, and so it made your life force stagnant? Or was your life force made stagnant by something else, maybe a physical blockage or a physical component, and then it stopped up the emotion and the energy movement, and that made you more angry, and it just becomes this continuous cycle? I will say that for most people in our culture currently, it probably is the first answer. Many people are afraid of feeling their own anger. They're afraid of expressing their anger. A lot of times it's because it was conditioned out of you. You were told that it was immature. You were told that it was bad manners. You were told that it was mean to feel angry. And so a lot of times there was never a safe space to express that anger as a child. And because of that, you learned to hold it in. You learned to stop it from being expressed. Or maybe you saw another adult or a caretaker expressing their anger in a way that was really negative. And so to you, it was scary and it was unsafe to feel angry and to have anger. So then you suppressed your own anger and rage. I work with a lot of clients who think that they don't get angry or that they never have anger. And it is very rare to find a person who is so at peace that they truly have no anger. A lot of times what happens is people are frustrated and angry about things, but it's underneath all of this sadness. It's underneath some other emotions that they do express on a regular basis. We are humans with egos living in this world. If you do not ever feel angry, that is a problem. I'm just going to say it. It's not wrong or bad to feel those emotions. They are not bad emotions. In fact, anger is an activator. Anger is an emotion that tells you where your boundaries are. It tells you when you're done with something. It tells you when a person is not safe for you or when you have poor communication. And it moves you into action. Anger is one of those emotions that is meant to move you forward, to propel you forward. When you feel those things, when you feel angry about your job because you just want to quit so bad, but you for some reason have just been holding on to it, anger is the thing that's going to come at you when you're having a really bad shift and you're finally going to take that leap. You're finally going to go make the plans to find a new job or to start your own business or whatever it is. This is the benefit. This is the value in anger. It's not a negative thing. When you feel constant anger toward a partner or a relationship that you have, you might start to realize it's because they take you for granted, or it's because they don't appreciate you and they don't treat you very well. And eventually that anger hopefully will propel you to move on or to have a conversation with them about how you're being treated. This is what it's meant to do. So when we suppress it, when we keep it inside of ourselves, then it starts to block everything up here and we feel frustrated and we feel immobile because we are not utilizing that energy of the emotion to move us forward. On this right side of the body, where the liver resides, we also find in this solar plexus area wounds that have to do with the father. So the father and the mother both have a really big energetic impact in this energy center in your body. On an energetic level, we hold so much of our parents. Whether you know them or not, whether you were adopted or whether you were taken care of by someone else in your childhood, doesn't matter. In fact, if you did have a different caretaker, maybe your grandparents were your caretakers, or you lived with an adoptive parent or family, you may have the energy of both your biological father and your adoptive father on this side of your body. So that's even more energy going on in here. But This is one of the reasons it is so difficult to not become our parents unless we are very conscious of choices that we're making, because all of their energy and their programming lives in this space in the body. So a lot of times, if your father was very absent or potentially suppressed his own anger or expressed his anger in a really dangerous way, if you had an alcoholic father or a father who was just not very emotionally involved, all of that sits right here in this area. The energy of the father is supposed to be stabilizing. It's supposed to be encouraging and empowering, but unfortunately, many people do not have that experience from their childhood. And a lot of times it's because their own father suffered their own trauma. And so it kind of just keeps going back further and further and further, and we just find ourselves in a long line of parents that were unloved or were uncared for properly or weren't allowed to express their own emotions. And the thing with parents, too, is that we are meant to have that connection with them. Energetically, it helps us to have that stability. It helps us to have that empowering figure that believes in you and that is supporting you through all of your endeavors and everything in your life. And so when that's removed from you, when you don't have that, or when you never had that, it creates this connection gap here. And it creates this space of difficulty believing in your own self, or supporting your own self, or finding support from other people. So if you had a difficult or a strenuous relationship, or have a strenuous relationship or tense relationship with your father, with your biological father, that will be something to look at in this area as you are working to heal your energy. Sometimes there is communication that can be had. There is a potential and a chance to rebuild that connection with your father in the best way that you know how. And sometimes it takes you being the bigger person to go and do that, to forgive, even if he was not the best father to you. There is a freedom that comes in the acceptance of that and the forgiveness because maybe he didn't have the best father, and so on. Now, that is so much easier said than done, and I completely understand for those of you that have not had the benefit of a real loving father. And I want to say here too, I have noticed what shows up around that is also the God wound. In this area, in this space of not feeling supported, of not feeling encouraged or loved, and especially if you have not had that experience with your biological father, there is a chance that you also do not feel loved and cared for by God, by the divine, by the universe, or that you've had to really search that out in your life. Typically, if you were raised with a father that was supportive and loving and truly that steadfast foundation that a child needs, then there's a good chance that you have a better relationship with the divine as well. The divine is a lot of times referred to as a masculine, as a father. And the reason is because it has that stability, that loving, encouraging, trusting stability that you need as a human. When you connect with that power, with that energy, it has those qualities. And so that's one of the reasons that this father wound can go so deep, even to your spiritual wounds, even to your spiritual connection with that higher power. So all of this is very deep, and it goes back. Like I said, it can be generational. It helps us to understand that all of this, everything that we are, is more than just us. We are so connected to the people that came before us and to the universe as a whole. And if you look out there, there are so many people that have broken relationships with their father. There are so many people that have been wounded in that way, that have been hurt in that way. And so how can we heal this place within ourselves and then come to the aid of other people who also need support and encouragement and real, steady love? That's where we're headed here. How can we heal this space and then empower other people through that support? So that's the father side, but then also there is the mother wound here. The mother wound tends to live on the left side of the body. In general, energetically, the right side is the masculine side, the left side is the feminine side. So a lot of times we find all of the mother energy here on the left side. People tend to have very complicated relationships with their mother in a different way than they do with their father. A lot of times the father wound is that disconnection and that absence or abuse, and the mother wound is a sense of powerlessness in some way, where maybe your mother felt powerless, your mother felt like she didn't have a voice or couldn't stand up for herself in some way. Or it is very emotionally tangled. A lot of mother-child relationships tend to be emotionally tangled. And this is also the space where if your mother worried or continues to worry all the time, that is going to set your nervous system in a state of worry, in a state of helplessness, in a state of lack of confidence. All of that is right here in this area. And this side is the space where we get caught in a lot of victimhood. We get caught in that powerlessness here of inaction, where we are constantly worried about the future. We're constantly thinking about all of the possibilities and everything that we could do or not do, or what could go wrong or right. And ultimately, we do not feel empowered to move forward. There may also be a sense here of being lonely. Many times, the mother in the traditional mother-father relationship has been at home taking care of the kids, and the father has that absence to him. And so a lot of times the dynamic here is that I have to do everything on my own. I can't ask for help. I can't get out of my situation. I feel trapped. I have so much to do. I feel overwhelmed. All of that energy here lies on this side. And what this mother energy is supposed to be is nurturing, a helper, a friend, a guide to tap into that intuitive side of you. If you had a good relationship with your mother or have one, a lot of times that's what she is for you. She is someone that you can talk to about anything, and she loves you either way. She is someone who encourages you to follow your intuitive leadings and may help you to make decisions and really kind of live in that flow. The problem is a lot of women in our society do not live in the feminine flow, because the feminine flow was suppressed for a long time and restricted to the point that, that women were only allowed to be housewives and mothers, and they weren't allowed to have creative ideas or innovation or all of that. And then in recent years, we have, of course, as we do, overcorrected, and now women feel the need to keep up with men in the same way that they work and that they function. And so they have just jumped into a man's society, regardless of their cycle, regardless of their natural hormonal flow. They have been doing the regular 40 or more hour a week work week while taking care of kids. They're completely overburdened and not allowed to be emotional or driven by emotion or intuition, even though that is a skill and a quality of women that really is our superpower. But because we still live in this man's world, we have had to adapt to the way a man functions. And many women have taken that on wholeheartedly and are now ignoring some of their feminine qualities because they're seen as weak or not as functional. So it's very rare and it's difficult to find in our society a woman, and especially a mother, who is really flowing in her feminine energy and her feminine spirit. So all of that is in here. When this place is balanced, that masculine energy and that feminine energy are balanced together. The masculine is that forward-moving, action-taking energy, and that feminine is that nurturing, intuitive energy. And when it's balanced here, both work together to help you move forward and take action from your internal power. And then lastly, the emotional space here really comes down to whether you feel supported and have felt supported by people around you, and if you feel supported by yourself, if you believe in yourself, if you believe in your goals and dreams and believe that you can accomplish them, if you believe in your worthiness and your purpose. So now we've talked about the emotional kind of mental components, but there are so many physical elements to the solar plexus because, again, of the space that it occupies in our body. So we're going to just briefly kind of go through all of that because a lot of people who have an imbalance in this area have physical problems and issues, and maybe have for years. I was one of those people because this area in my body is one that is more undefined. And even though I had loving and supportive parents growing up, I wasn't fully processing emotions and they were getting trapped in this area of my body. So let's talk about this a little bit. Each energy center kind of has a hormone that it correlates with specifically. There are kind of two hormones here that are connected with the solar plexus energy center. The first one is insulin. So, of course, insulin is in charge of regulating your blood sugar. It allows the cells in the body to absorb glucose from the bloodstream and then to use that energy or to store it to use later. Many people in our current culture are insulin resistant. And what that means is basically that the body's cells aren't responding properly to insulin. So this is making it harder for the glucose to actually get into the cell. And because of this, the pancreas will produce more insulin to compensate, and then there's higher levels of insulin, which leads to higher levels of blood sugar. So over time, this is why we have things like diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes. And there are even studies coming out now that are talking about something called type 3 diabetes, which is Alzheimer's and dementia, and how our blood sugar really regulates so much of our system that it's even affecting us to the point of our mental health. Now, I could talk about blood sugar regulation all day long, but I will not for the sake of the length of this podcast. And maybe at some point we'll talk about that more extensively. But the pancreas and that ability to regulate blood sugar is part of what just keeps our digestion moving properly and keeps us healthy and balanced on a physical level. Like I said, there are so many diseases that come from insulin resistance. And unfortunately, because of the standard American diet, most people in our society have some degree of insulin resistance and are not metabolically healthy, which basically means we're not processing the things in our body the way that they should be processed because our body is on overdrive here, having to deal with some of our foods and diet that are in our culture. That's kind of all that I'll get into about it right now. But if you want more information on that, there are lots of resources out there, books and all sorts of podcasts that you can listen to on insulin resistance, and it'll really open up your eyes and give you a good picture as to whether or not you are metabolically healthy. I'll try to link some in here too for you. The second hormone that is associated with the solar plexus is adrenaline. And adrenaline is produced by the adrenal glands, which kind of sit right on top of the kidneys. So the whole point of adrenaline is taking action. It's our ability to take action, to respond to our environment, to respond to challenges and adapt and move on those challenges. Again, because our society is set up the way that it is, many of us have overactive adrenal glands and are constantly fatigued. And the reason we're fatigued is because our adrenal glands are running, and it's almost as if the water in the back of the toilet is like continuously running, and someone just needs to lift the handle and it'll stop. That's kind of what's happening with many of our adrenal glands, is they're just going. And we become burnt out, we become overtired. And not only does this impact our physical energy and our ability to actually digest our food and to process things in our physical body, but it's affecting our drive, it's affecting our emotions, it's affecting our mood. So if you do feel like you're tired all the time, if you feel lethargic, if you feel like you wake up tired and you can't fall asleep at night, your adrenals are probably out of whack. So look into adrenal fatigue. There are all sorts of things you can do here to really balance the adrenals. And I think at some point I'll even do a whole episode and give you a adrenal reset energy session, because that is kind of one thing that we can do with sound and with energy, is bring those adrenal glands back into harmony with the body. But that is another area of this physical correlation with the solar plexus. And then we get here into full digestion and the digestive fire. Basically, this area of the body, in addition to being like your internal battery, is also the place that absorbs nutrients to be used. And it really is like that internal flame, burning everything up, breaking everything down. And when this digestive fire is weak, when it's just like a little flicker, this leads to autoimmune problems. It leads to digestive issues. It leads to metabolism issues. It really affects your ability to digest food physically and for the body to utilize those nutrients. And we're back here to the chicken or the egg scenario, where sometimes there are digestive issues because there are so many emotions that are not being processed. And then sometimes there are emotions that aren't able to be processed because of this digestive constriction here. So really getting into that and seeing for yourself, are you eating foods that are supporting your emotional release and your emotional health? And are you dealing with your emotions and dealing with the processing of your emotions in order to support your physical health? What happens a lot of times in this area is it becomes constricted and it becomes tightened. If you imagine someone in your mind who is really insecure, who is really tired, who is not very ambitious, not going for their goals and dreams, when you think about that posture of that person, do you not think of them as hunched over, completely constricted on the front? And when you think about someone who is powerful, who is walking in their power, who is open and loving and engaged, and also making waves in the world, are they not standing up straight with their chest open, with their stomach exposed? We hunch over when we feel fear, when we feel afraid, when we feel unsure. And we are tall and we are proud when we feel powerful and confident. And so the same thing happens energetically. When we are feeling powerless and when we are feeling insecure and afraid of our emotions and unwilling to process them, we get hunched over, we get constricted energetically, and all of that gets really, really stagnant. And then it starts to affect that physical body, and it starts to affect the way the energy moves through the entire system. And this is why we are seeing more things like stomach problems, autoimmune problems, anxiety really gets stuck and sits in that stomach. And we're seeing a lot of colon problems, colon cancer. I have heard more about colon cancer in the last 2 years than I had ever heard in my life before. And now part of that, of course, has to do with our American diet and processed foods and the chemicals that are used in farms and all of that. But what about the emotional aspects here? The colon can hold sadness and rejection, and it can hold defensiveness and grief and self-abuse and stubbornness. All of this, if it's not processed, it's just making everything so stagnant in there. And then people are getting sick. People are getting legitimate disease from being stubborn, from holding in their emotions. They are energetically constipating themselves. And a lot of times it's out of fear, it's out of anxiety, it's out of a sense of powerlessness and an inability to be that bright, sunshine version of yourself unapologetically. There's a real sense of having to just grit your teeth and bear it, get through it. That's what lives here if it's not addressed. So if we are confident, if we are feeling in our power, if we are open and this energy is moving, we're not ashamed of emotion. We're not afraid of it, and we're not afraid to let it process through us, however that looks. So we talked about the adrenals, we talked about adrenal fatigue and the stress of our culture and all of that having to do with this area as well. So that's another physical component. But then lastly, the diaphragm is part of all of this. The diaphragm is kind of that line between the heart and the upper energy centers, the more etheric energy centers or more spiritual energy centers, and the lower, more animalistic energy centers. That diaphragm is almost like a doorway to that space. And what controls the diaphragm is the breath. And you can talk about breath with the heart chakra as well, of course, because it's all in that heart space. But the breath and the diaphragm really do impact the solar plexus quite a bit. So if you have restriction there, if you think about that tightness, if you think about that hunched over feeling, you are most likely breathing really shallow and you're reducing that energy. The word breath and spirit actually used to be synonymous. When a lot of ancient cultures would talk about the spirit, they would use the word breath for spirit. It was the same. And if you think about it, breath is really what gives us life, right? We can live without food for a while. We can live without water, but we cannot live without oxygen. We cannot live with our breath. It is when that breath enters the body that a baby starts to cry and animate. And it's with that final breath that we lose someone that we love dearly and they go on to eternity. So not only is that breath our life force or part of our life force here, but it also helps to move things through the body. It helps to move things through the system. So if your breath is constricted, it's a really good idea to start opening up that space and really working the diaphragm and breathing into the belly and moving that torso around in a way that is going to free up and shake up that breath energy and that space right there. So let's talk now about overactive versus underactive solar plexus. I think you've got a pretty good idea, but I just want to list it out for you so that if you are wondering about yourself, you can kind of gauge here where you're at. If you have an overactive solar plexus, you probably have a lot of control issues. You probably have excessive ambition to the point that you are really just continually running. And a lot of times when this happens, it's like a battery that's just running and running and running, and eventually it's going to burn out. So if it's overactive, you want to catch it before you burn out. A lot of times, these are people that have digestive issues that are hot feeling digestive issues, right? So it's like that internal fire is overactive. It's too hot. So you're going to have like ulcers, things like that. you're going to have diarrhea. It's going to be the opposite of being constipated, right? You're releasing too much, too quickly, too hot, too fast. Now, if you have an underactive solar plexus, you probably have low self-esteem. You probably can't make decisions. You're pretty wishy-washy, back and forth. You are probably procrastinating, or you just don't feel motivated at all. You maybe feel taken advantage of. You feel like people are walking all over you, like you're a doormat, and you probably don't have very good boundaries. You probably will go out of your way to help other people, but will not ask for help and support for yourself. The theme here too, whether you're underactive or overactive, is a lot of times you don't ask for help either way. If you're overactive, it's because you want to do everything yourself. And if you're underactive, it's because you don't believe that you're worthy of being helped. And then if you're underactive here, you also probably have fatigue and are lethargic and have poor digestion. So again, you might be constipated or you might have digestive issues here. The other thing is you might have low immunity. So this is where autoimmune diseases come into play. Many people who have autoimmune diseases feel a lot better when they get some energy work. And part of the reason is this, okay? So if you're balanced, you're going to feel confident. You're going to feel powerful, like the good kind of powerful, where you can help people, you can help yourself, but you can also ask for support when you need it. And it doesn't bother you because you're not feeling embarrassed about it. You're not feeling stubborn. You'll have healthy digestion. You'll most likely not have any food allergies or anything like that. A lot of allergies also have to do with that digestive fire and the energy around that. You'll have strong boundaries. You'll be able to say no when you want to say no to things. And you'll be able to finish what you start. You'll be able to achieve your goal and then move on to the next thing without getting burnt out and without quitting. And it feels so good. It feels so good when you're finally able to get to that 100% of your goal and check it off the list. It feels so good. And then you can move on to the next thing. And then that just builds your belief in yourself even more. So if you are feeling like you're underactive here or you're overactive, but especially if you're feeling underactive, we just need to get you to the point energetically where you can make those tiny baby steps forward, where you can take that first step to really start to believe in yourself again and to build that confidence. Confidence is built by taking action. And you learn nothing from sitting and pondering about how to take action. You only learn by actually taking the action. So we just need to get you to that point if you are feeling fatigued and underactive here. Now for creatives, it's the same thing. You are going to feel creative and like you can show up confidently and authentically as your creative self. No matter what's going on for you, no matter what your financial situation is, or whether you are working a gig or not, or whether you are working on a piece of art or not, you are going to feel confident and you're going to be able to stand in that authentically. It's also going to allow you to take risks without worrying about criticism, without worrying about other people judging you. If you have a fear of failure, if you have a fear of criticism, man, this area needs some work. Overthinking too, overthinking and perfectionism, again, it's that mind ruling rather than allowing your body to move from that gut intuition. So if you find yourself working on projects up to 80% and then the last 20% is you overthinking and making sure everything's perfect, let's talk about the solar plexus. Let's address the solar plexus because that's what's happening. That's what's happening here. This area also, when it's balanced, it allows you to step into some of those leadership positions. And I will always say, I think artists are meant to be leaders. We're meant to be the leaders of our society because we are the ones with the new ideas, the innovation, the emotion to make people think and to move people. And so we are leaders whether we want to be or not. And the solar plexus being balanced helps us to be able to step into that leadership, to have the boundaries, to be able to take lead, to have the confidence in yourself, in your vision, and to collaborate with people too. And then lastly, really just completing your projects and turning your visions into reality is the ultimate benefit here for creatives of being fully balanced in this space. And creating out of joy and out of play and just enjoyment for life rather than a need to prove something to someone or creating out of fear or lack. Like I said, this place is really that sunshine inside of us. This is the place that our vitality lives, where we thrive, and it's the place of play. It's the place of fun. So let's talk about what you can do to start to balance the solar plexus. Of course, I will always say getting energy work is going to be super helpful for you. Highly recommend it. But on your own, you can work with your breath. I think that is the best thing to do to really start to open up and activate this area and activate that internal fire. I'm going to put out a breathwork video for you this week inside the membership. So those of you that are in there, it is going to be just a really nice little session to get everything moving. But you can do all kinds of breath work. I mean, you could do fire breathing to really activate the solar plexus, or you can do gentle parasympathetic breathing, which is going to really help calm those adrenal glands, slow everything down if you're feeling super burnt out. And then lastly, as we are talking about digestion here, one of the things you can really do is get your hormones balanced, get your blood sugar levels balanced, and eat foods that support your digestive system. Foods that support the digestive system are going to be fibrous foods, but also foods that are yellow to go along with the yellow in this energy center. And then to stoke the digestive fire, we want to utilize warming foods. So if you do have a really underactive solar plexus and you feel like you have poor digestion and that energy is just not moving there, you're going to want warming foods. So you're going to want ginger or spices. Also, temperature warm foods are good. So broth and soup and tea and foods that feel like you are warm and cozy. Those are the type of foods that you want to eat to really build that digestive fire. If you are overactive, you're going to want to eat more cooling foods. And so that really is, temperature cooling foods and maybe staying away from spicy foods, that kind of thing. And then lastly, the other thing you can really do is get out in the sun. I know this isn't possible for everyone all the time, depending on where you live and what the season is, but just getting yourself in the sunshine does something to that internal fire. It speaks to your internal fire on an energetic level and invites you to warm up, to open up, and starts to move things through your system in a way that you can't do otherwise. So the more you can get in the sunshine, even if it's not totally warm outside, if you can just get 15 minutes in the sun every day or as often as possible, it's really going to help balance this space. So some questions to ask yourself here are, do you struggle with asserting yourself? Do you struggle with setting boundaries? Or how do you handle criticism? How do you handle feedback? How does that feel to your system, to your body? Maybe ask yourself where you're holding back from really stepping into your personal power, and what would that feel like to step into your personal power? And then also looking at, are you giving yourself the support that you need? Are you allowing yourself to be supported by other people? Are you asking for help when you need it? And if you are or if you are not, why? And how can you support yourself better here? Of course, I have to mention that if you do need more support or you would like more support, I'm here for you one-on-one. We can schedule an appointment and address all of this in your energy. If you are not interested in a one-on-one healing session, I do have a membership that's $7.77 a month, and that will also help to support you. There's lots of amazing people in there who want to grow as well, want to step into their own power, and they are going to support you on the journey too. So definitely check that out if that's something that interests you. And otherwise, join me next week where we talk all about the heart and love. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you soon.